Welcome to Trekkie and Beyond, the Star Trek podcast. I'm Monica.
And I'm Andrea. And guys, we're going to cry, but we're not because we have so much to discuss. This is episodes 8, 9, and 10 of season 5 of Lower Decks. So we have 3 episodes in this take. And in this one, we have Upper Decks, which was episode 8, Fissure Quest, which was episode 9, and the episode I did not want to watch, the new Next Generation, because I'm not ready for this to be over. So, Monica, before I sob, what are your initial thoughts of those episodes?
I have to admit, episodes 8 and 9 were not as memorable for me as the finale. And the finale brought the whole story together. I really loved the finale, but if you look on the rewatch, I liked 8 and 9 better, just as not as amazing as the finale. I really appreciate the fact that it became the whole story, both in a season as well as the series. And we'll talk more about that. We're going to have a season reaction review, and then we'll also host a series review. So I'm not going to go into some other takes that I want to talk about. So stay tuned for that one. But for these 3, the most memorable moments for me were like the Freeman character development and really showing the fact that she has this work-life balance and how her family supports her in that. And all know that I'm a romantic at heart. So I loved both endings here and showed the support of her husband. And then also I really like to see Brad Boimer grow, and he filled in his beard nicely. And you could see he also filled in he became more mature over time. And I like that. There's a lot of other development we'll dive deeper into, a lot of Easter eggs. And oh my goodness, I saw Laurel. I saw a Star Trek Discovery scene that I can't get out of my head. So we'll talk about that more too. What about you?
So, I actually really enjoyed most of these episodes. Episode 8, I did not dislike. Wanted more from. I understand what was there. Like, again, if this was from season 1 or 2, it would have fit right in. But for this to be season 5 and this is the last season, I would have preferred it to just like episode 8 to go to season 1 or 2, episode 9 becomes season 8, and then episode 10 has part 1 and part 2. Just because so much happened in episode 10 that I just felt like we needed more time to discuss. There was so much that was pulled in from all the other seasons, and all of this season itself. There were so many Easter eggs to other shows as well as this show in general. So I quite loved it. I loved seeing Captain Freeman get her her husband come and support her. I love seeing Beckett like grow and also still throw a tantrum, but this time not throw the tantrum publicly. She threw it privately in her room. I love Tindy growing. I love seeing Rutherford grow, and I was very shocked by his growth. Seeing the way they all sort of worked and sort of grew up together in these 5 years that we've watched this show, it was beautiful. And I'm not gonna cry. Did I cry watching the episode? I did. And we're just going to engage our cores today, people. We're going to engage our cores. I love that phrase. It's my new favorite phrase. And let's go ahead and engage our core into episode 8, Upper Decks. So this episode was all about learning how basically the executive squad of Star Trek, the Cerritos, how they are doing stuff day to day, which was very interesting because I feel like we see these in all these other episodes. I feel like we see the way Ransom and Freeman and Dr. Ta'ana and Shax all sort of handle out their day-to-day tasks in different snippets throughout the episode. So I thought it was very interesting to have one full episode geared around them when, in my opinion, this would have fit a little bit easier in season 1 or 2. So that was my only hiccup with this episode. I just feel like it didn't fit in season 5, and especially in the current storyline that we're in, it just didn't work for me. But it was interesting to see how Billups and engineering handles, like how every little crisis, how he handles it, how he talks his, and so how he trains on the job with his team. It was interesting to see that Dr. Ta'ana was trying to feel pain so she could better handle pain with when her like patients come in. She's like, make me feel pain so I know what they're dealing with. How Shax is dealing with his personal issues, how Freeman really wants to be there for everyone on the crew. And then Ransom just being Ransom, and I love him for it. Like I love that man. But him helping bring the crew together by making him the actual villain in their story to make them work together, which is very interesting. What did you think of episode 8?
First of all, I want to say that because we are we're reviewing and reacting to the season of Lower Decks in 4 chunks, like I feel like I'm at a different advantage for this review of episode 8 compared to reviewing episode by episode. So now that I've seen the finale and then go back to 8, I have a different reaction to this because I feel like we definitely know where the characters are going now. And they want to become they've been sort of kind of promoted to bridge crew. So so this is where they'll be going into these other types of um adventures and level of decision making that they weren't used to because they were all in their own bubble. And so and they were having fun pumpkin carving and not thinking that anything else was going on outside of their kind of role and responsibility. And sometimes in your position at work, you stay in that role and responsibility and you're like, I don't want to know what else is going on. I got this job, I got this checklist, I'm doing this. Right? But then when you step up, or if your boss is out and you have to step up even temporarily or for a long term, then you're like, oh, there's so much other stuff going on. So they're completely oblivious to what's going on, but they will in the future find out that there's a whole lot more risk and the ship doesn't center around them and their activities.
When we started this with them, they were like Lower Decks. And so to your point, yes, we're seeing, talking about this episode, knowing what happens in episode 9 and 10 is sort of just like a little bit of a mind freak because it's like, okay, you're going to be them one day. But strictly going off of episode 8, even just watching how Ransom handles the Delta shift. And also it was great. Well, I will say it was great to see that the Delta shift and then I think it was a mix of another shift hated each other and they were bickering with each other because they were like a mix of the old like Lower Decks whatever, if they were like A shift and then the other shift was Delta shift or B shift, whatever it was. There were 2 different shifts working together and they were having issues working together. And so then I like that Ransom helped them come together by making him like the common enemy, talking about his workout routine. And almost like people say you kill him with kindness, he was killing them with boredness. Like, can we just finish our work so we don't have to listen to him talk anymore? Because I'm so bored. I can't listen to him do reps anymore. I can't watch him do reps anymore. Also, though, I have to say, the villain of episode 8, which that did shock me, the bad guys in this episode. I will admit, I was shocked by that. Episode 8, I did not see it coming until it happened. And even then, to see how each bridge crew member like solved the problem, all doing their own thing. We see that Shax, while he's going through his mental battle with his past and his the ghost of his past of everything that he had to do to survive, while he's having his hallucinations and having his deep meditation, he believes he's fighting his demons and he's fighting the intruders. We have Dr. Ta'ana, who is horrible, has horrible bedside manner and cannot feel the pain or cannot sympathize with the pain of her patients. And she's being electrocuted. She's being all these things injected with whatever so she could feel some type of emotion or pain or whatever so she can relate to her patients. She's attacked. And in that, she's like, she doesn't feel it and she attacks back. It was, to me, it was just sort of interesting to see how Ransom's crew was able to help take down the invaders because he was fake sleeping, through all of it. But like they pulled together in and they were able to like take out the invaders and help the little space cow thingies get back to where they're going. Get along, doggies. So it was interesting for that. I just still feel like this could have been a season 1 or season 2 episode.
Well, let's face it, this was like a typical Trojan horse episode, right? You're bringing in what you think is a nice person for a negotiation, and in the end, that's the undercover bad guy.
Yeah.
Right? And so what this episode was able to do though for us was show us some character development and arcs over across the seasons that could not, I think, fit into the next 2 episodes, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Because the first few seasons that I learned about Ransom, I didn't really like his character so much, right? But it's growing up on me, and then I'm able to see more of his leadership skills. I don't like his leadership skills. I think it's manipulative, but I see more of it, right? And so we also see that there's a darker side also for someone who dies and then comes back and is resurrected, right? And so there's the inner trauma and PTSD that's going on, and some of these other ripple effects to the development of the characters over time. I really liked Billups here, like you mentioned before. I was like, oh, I need I miss not having as much. I feel like maybe every season there's like 1 or 2 Billups interactions. So I'm starting to get into my concerns with this episode. I feel like the Delta crew and the Beta crew, I felt like I wanted to see the same crew members that I saw previously. And I wanted to see Jet. Like, I felt like I didn't really know any of these, or I didn't remember them. So they could have been complete newbies to me. But for that leadership, I don't know, dynamic, it was missed for me because I felt like there wasn't that development there. And my second big gripe is like, okay, they're pumpkin carving, but I'm like, of all the traditions from the 19th, this is the one that's going to persist. Like,
I've never carved a pumpkin, and I don't feel like I'm missing anything.
and like they could use, I felt like there could have been more advanced technology for that, like some other tradition that's a hands-on activity for them. I didn't really connect with that part of the story, and I thought that there could have been more than just the pumpkin carving.
You had mentioned something about Ransom, and I just have to say I have and always will be Team Ransom. And if I said anything in the past, no, I didn't. Team Ransom. Here's the thing: I'm Team Ransom with Beckett. I want them together so badly. Since I saw them in season 1, they have been my ship that I have loved. When I have looked for fan fiction, it's been for them because they break the rule of platonic friendships for me. But for Ransom, I like his leadership style because his leadership style is I see something in you that you don't see yourself, so I'm just going to make you see it. And I like that because sometimes like people like Boimler who second and third and fourth like guess themselves, you need someone who's like, look, I believe in you, just do it. Stop overthinking, do it. And then with someone like with Beckett, who is going to try and sabotage herself, he's like, I'm not going to let you do that. I'm not going to let you fall through the cracks just because you assume the wrong is about to happen. So for him, I like his leadership style because he's like, I don't care how you're going to sabotage yourself. I'm going to figure out what you need to survive, and I'm going to be that person for you so you can get done what needs to get done. Because sometimes that's the only way, as we're seeing Beckett and Boimler, they always succeed at the end of his lessons.
I really liked Carol Freeman and Zoe Freeman as a couple.
Power couples.
Yes. So yeah, I'm trying to find a transition. So they're
They're your one ship.
yeah, and they had a long distance relationship for a very long time, and
Mhm.
so it was so sweet for him to arrange this rendezvous during an anniversary. And I really like that Carol Freeman's assistant was in on it and had helped to arrange this.
Mhm.
And then they were able to retreat to the holodeck for for dinner together. Paris, but I appreciate the fact that he also greeted her with flowers and all of that. It reminded me of another couple that was greeted, in which like Saru greeted Tarina with flowers, and I know that was a couple that you didn't like, but I like them. So
I will say I support the Freemans, and as we can see, an admiral can make time to come see his wife on her ship. He came to her.
mhm.
He came to her. If he wanted to, he would. He did, so he did. That's all I have to say about that relationship. And on that note, we're going to take a quick break.
Welcome back to Trekkie and Beyond.
Part 2. We are discussing episode 9, Fissure's Quest of Lower Decks, season 5. Fissure's Quest is a very interesting episode. And one of the things I like about Lower Decks is that sometimes they have callbacks to other like little storylines from seasons before in a way that only can be done in animation. And so we get to see an old character, an old friend, I think from season 3 or season 2. No, came from I think season 2. We get to see William Boimler. For those who are not familiar with William, he is Brad's clone buddy. And this episode is all about him. And he is the captain of his own ship and of his own crew, which is very interesting because at the point when they were created, they were exactly the same. Both Brad and William, exactly the same. And we see last time we saw William, he faked his death, or Section 31 faked his death, and now he's on the secret mission and he is exploring the fissures, trying to figure out, leading the team, trying to figure out what is going on. And he has like a hodgepodge of a crew that seem to be mostly made up of other people who survived their ship blowing up next to the fissure, which was interesting. But it was also great to see him again because I was wondering at the beginning of the season, were we going to see William again? Because like the way they hinted at his death and then resurrection in season 3 or 4, I can't remember what it was. I think it was season 3. We knew that he was alive. We knew that he was working for Section 31. We knew that there was more to his story. And so I was wondering, I was like, hey, the clock is ticking. That this is the last season. Are we going to see William again? And we got him in this episode. And funny enough, he is very despondent. Brad's goal in life is to be a captain of a ship. That is what Brad wants. Brad Boimler wants to be a captain. And his clone got it and is so annoyed by it and hates his life. And I found that so interesting. Only because sometimes in life we all think that we want that next step. We want that next leadership goal. We want that next thing, whatever it is, to give us the validation for whatever we think that we need. And yet, William got exactly what Brad wanted. And he would do anything not to have it, basically. He's so over being in charge. He's annoyed with his crew. He's not surrounded by his friends. He has so many Harry Kims, he doesn't know what to do with. He can just toss one and another one appears. It's very interesting. So before we get into the episode about William himself, what did you think about him?
I agree with you. It's interesting to see a version of Boimer with every the power that he wanted,
Mm-hmm.
but without the happiness, right?
Mm-hmm.
And without the friendships. So he was always stressed out. You could see the dark bags. he meaning William the clone, the dark bags under his eyes. He actually has a little receding hairline. His hairline's further back. And he's just like hunched over a lot of the time. He's grumpy. So it's it's interesting to see that dynamic. And he was so happy to see Mariner, even though it's a different Mariner, but he was just happy to connect with a brighter time in his life, I think. And so I also like seeing this whole Section 31 dynamic as well, this Black Ops.
Now that you said Mariner, so Mariner is in engineering and she's a total nerd, like in a different sense than she's a nerd on Cerritos. She's in the yellow shirt and everything, people, which possible Halloween costume because I look amazing in yellow. But we see when he gives her a hug that he is actually genuinely happy to see someone from his old life, to see someone who's familiar, who is a friend, someone who I feel like he feels like he's on par with, not in the leadership role, but just like as a person to person, I connect with you. You are my person. I can't do this without you type of relationship. They are one of my favorite platonic friendships, and keyword on platonic, please. So his ship is filled with a lot of Easter eggs. So I recognize some of the characters that we got to see in this show, and I understand from like other people's responses that this was this Easter egg extravaganza, because some people were just like, "Oh, I love it." So I'm giving my review as someone who is almost like a new Star Trek viewer who has not who does not completely remember all the old episodes because I watched them over 20 years ago and I don't remember them. I apologize. But it was very interesting to see to see the Cardassian doctor. I do remember him from Voyager. No, not Voyager. Deep Space Nine. And it was very interesting to see him married. I remember that character. I couldn't remember like them ever interacting from my memory. But I remember the character that is his husband in this show. And now how he's a hologram and how they fight and how they laugh and have their whole relationship, which is very interesting because the way I remember that Cardassian, he was never that light and free when I saw him on Deep Space Nine. And I maybe have saw maybe 1 or 2 episodes of him, so I'm not super familiar. But Monica, what did you think about all of the Easter eggs about the characters that we got to see?
Well, the interesting part of this, communicate a story in a multiverse that has such deep cuts, but balances new storyline, and then also for newbies as well from Enterprise, and then the Kardashian doctor is from Deep Space Nine. But there were a lot of different Star Trek characters into this one, and so it has multiple generations there. So it's a multiverse with multiple generations, and so like Enterprise is the prequel. So it's even much earlier in the time. So it's like, how could all of these characters be together? But it's just because you can make it work here because of this dimensional rift. And so I guess there's time travel involved in this as well. I really love the diversity in this episode, not just of different alien species, but different thought and different perspectives coming into and discussing why space travel is important, not just for like learning new things, but also self-discovery. Because I think that's why a lot of us also travel to different countries now. It's to also learn about the other countries, but also we learn about ourselves during that journey. I love all of this reflection of the past and then moving forward in this episode.
So William's whole mission is to figure out what is causing these fissures. And a lot of his crew, again, is made up of people whose ship also blew up because of a fissure. And so they're trying to find the quote unquote bad guy in this episode. And their Beckett is able to figure out that the fissure, when it opens up one, it's creating another rift, and so that's why all these other rifts are happening. And she figures out how to get the ship to come right in front of them, and they're able to get the bad guys, quote unquote. They shoot them down to a planet that's supposed to be very friendly, and in this universe, those alien things are not friendly. I remember them; they were friendly before last time we saw them. They are not friendly now. They have advanced weaponry. They take them down and like they lock up the crew. And then that is when William and Beckett meet Lily Sloan, who was in the ship they shot down. And the Lily Sloan they know created the warp core. This Lily Sloan created the fissure opener. So it's like, it's very interesting that she's still the premier scientist who's creating new technologies that didn't exist. Except this time, she's not doing a warp core. This version of herself is creating a way to jump from different dimensions and travel that way. I will say, this episode threw me because one, it wasn't really a bad guy, and it was about stopping an accident, which was interesting. It made me think of season 3 of Discovery, and I was hoping for a moment. I was like, please don't do what Discovery did and make all of this whole bad guy and not bad guy an accident, because these fissures are destroying the universe. They are sort of like, they're displacing people. What is going on? Some people are dying because of them, even though Lily is not intending for any of this to happen. As she's doing her research, as she's traveling, she is the end goal. Finding her and stopping her is what his mission is. It's just great that she is not technically the bad guy, until we find a Harry Kim who is upset that he is the only one of his Harrys who is a lieutenant or has 2 pips, and decides to take the ship and go crazy. Because I mean, that dude went crazy so quick. Like, it just was like, how dare you, how dare any other version of me not be promoted by now? Um, and then he ends up being the bad guy of the season, because he ends up stealing Lily's ship, and in their quest to stop him, they destroy the ship, causing the universe to almost become like a bomb, in a sense, for lack of a better word. And they end up sending it to William's original timeline, because he knows that his friends, Beckett, Tendi, Rutherford, are all there. And a version of himself is there as well, who can save the day. And if anyone can figure out how to stop it, those 4 people can. And he sends this ticking time bomb back to his own universe. When if Harry Kim did not go crazy, there would be no problem. Which I found that very interesting, that the bad guy, the big bad of this season, of the mystery of the who's causing these fissures, was an accident that then turned into a life and death situation, because one guy decided to not take a breath before stealing a ship.
Yeah, Harry Kim with 2 pips let his ego get in the way. I found it interesting that the like the evildoer here was also a member of the Federation. So it can be someone on the inside. You let your guard down, they beamed him aboard, right? So like, he came aboard, and he ended up undermining this whole mission, as they were trying to save him and save the rest of, I guess, all dimensions. You never know who will have alternate motives, right? And who's not going to be the team player until you have to take a lot of risk, until you're in crunch time, and then you realize, oh, this person is out for themselves. And sometimes that happens in workplace dynamics. It happens in families. Sometimes it just happens in life in general, right? But it's sometimes it mostly shines when you're in crisis mode. And even though he was able, the Harry Kim with 2 pips was able to move up the ladder, he was not the he didn't have the best foundation, and he wasn't able to communicate out his concerns either. He just jumped to conclusions and decided to leave them all behind, even though the ship was still under repair, and he wasn't even trusting them into like what the problems were. He said that was all like science mobo jumbo. Like he's so sorry, dude, but you ended up in your own demise there.
Yep. And in pure Lower Decks fashion, the last scene of it, we get sort of a cut back to our universe's Lower Decks crew, basically where they were sitting at the beginning of the episode when they were talking about William for like a split second before we got to see William's story. And Brad is just reading through his pad, and then in pure boiler fashion, we're all gonna die. And runs away. And that is the end of episode 9. And I almost threw my remote at the TV at that part because I was like, seriously? We have one more episode and now we have to like figure out how to do all of this in one episode. This is when I was like, episode 9 should have been episode 8, and then episode 10 should have been part 1 and part 2 because I needed more. I wanted more from that episode. I wanted there to be a big bad, and because there wasn't really truly a big bad who had this big nefarious plan that they had to take down and it was all an accident, I felt a little gypped. Just slightly. Just slightly a little gypped. But I still will have to say I did like the Easter eggs that I caught, and I do know that there's a lot of people out there who caught so many more Easter eggs than I did, than you did, than people I even saw. I know there's more Easter eggs than that were out there in this episode, and it was. I think it also was a way of showing Brad, a version of Brad getting what he wanted and not being happy with it. And I think that's for me, that was such a telling little story in of itself, because the last time we saw William, he was excited to go down Section 31. He was excited to go down that road. And he's like, I got everything I wanted and I am miserable. I am absolutely miserable. And I think it was interesting because I will admit, I've been annoyed with Brad in the last couple of episodes. Some of his episodes, like, dude, just get a backbone and chill. You're fine. It's like, actually, keep doing what you're doing, Brad. Keep being all crazy and all of this. Never change, because I don't ever want to see you become Section 31, Brad. I want you to be this crazy, annoying, loud, worrying person who puts his friends first and never, ever feels like he's alone and never loses the love that he has. The Federation, I should say.
I have 3 like final points about this episode, and one is that I like the concept of this episode. I think there's just a lot of metaverse, interdimensional science mumbo jumbo that was a little tough for me, but that happens. But I like the fact that this was like a true space adventure, and because Cerritos is California class second contact, we don't normally see this big high risk in which like everyone everywhere, multiple dimensions impacted by this, right? And so they're building up to this next episode of why the finale is so important, right? And then also why there needs to be this teamwork and collaborations and all of this building up. And that leads me into the fact that like I think I may have misspoke a little bit earlier about Lily Sloan, and I like the fact that they reflected back to the past, even if it's another dimension, the fact that she built a core, because I also love to see a strong Black female in an engineering lead, and that she made also this innovative technology that built upon all these other series, right? Without Warp Core in that dimension, right? We wouldn't have as fast of a space travel. So I just wanted to circle back to that. And then lastly, I had the pleasure of meeting the the actor that played Harry Kim at Star Quest pre-COVID. And so what we're able to do here in this episode is also just like I don't know, give it like a virtual handshake, a wave to all the fandom out there.
Mhm.
We appreciate you. We see you. We're bringing back these characters because they could have introduced a new character into this role. But to bring these actors back and fold them into the storyline was nicely done.
We're going to take another quick break. And when we come back, we're going to discuss the episode that I don't want to discuss because I don't want it to exist, because it existing means this beautiful show is wrapping up. So, will I cry while we discuss episode 10? I might. So, hold my hand through it. Don't go anywhere. We will be right back. Episode 10 of season 5 of Lower Decks. We come to you all now just to say this was an amazing episode. It was a lot. There was a lot of things thrown into this episode. We have the culmination of the series mystery. We have the crew trying to figure out how to solve this unsolvable mystery. We have our Klingon friends who we saw earlier in the season coming back. We have Easter egg that Monica said she saw that I did not see, but it's okay. I'm gonna go back and look. We have our characters growing and technically outgrowing the name of this show. There's so much that needs to be discussed, and let's not discuss this. Then it's never over. I'm just joking. Let's get in to episode 10, the new next generation. First, we see with the Klingons. We see the sister of of those two Klingons who were killed earlier in the season and earlier in another season, in season 4. We see that their ship is one of their ships is destroyed by a Fissure just appearing, and she now is going to use that to like get revenge. Then we see Boimler is reading his pad. We see the crew of the Cerritos just hanging out talking, and then he reads his pad. He sort of understands everything his clone is telling him, and he freaks out. I will admit, I'm very glad he immediately told the captain, and then she immediately reported it. And I love how everyone was just like, all right, this is someone else's problem. This is not our problem. And even the admirals were just like, normally, we would never give this to a California class. But there's no one else here, so have at it. Wait, what? Like, and I love how they're like, wait, Enterprise can't handle this? Someone else can't handle this? What are we talking about? What do you mean this is up to us? No, we're not. We don't do this. Someone else handles all these big actions, and the admirals are just like, yeah, no one's there to save the universe. So it's up to you guys to solve the unsolvable and close this fissure and get through the Schrodinger cloud and not transform and survive, or we all die. But no pressure. No pressure. I love that we get to see, again, some more of our Cerritos crew coming up to the task, realizing, all right, look, our backs against the wall. It's the bottom of the 9th. We only have 2 more hits. We can't get any more outs. We have to make our stand here. And if the people listening to this think that what I just said didn't make sense, that was on purpose. Because this episode did not make sense of what they were trying to do to solve it. Because as the Cerritos is trying to figure out a way to solve this problem, you get the Klingons' friends coming asking for asylum, and you have the brothers fighting, and the smart brother, who's technically the dumb brother, just like, hey, we need asylum. Stop trying to give ourselves to the Klingons. I don't want to die here. We need to survive. And then we have the Klingons coming and wanting to declare war with the Cerritos for the 2 asylum seekers, while engineering is trying to retrofit the entire ship with a new shield so they could go into Schrodinger's cloud so their ship does not transform so they can stop the rift. Does that sound like a convoluted day to you? It did to me. And this episode was a little convoluted. So just as a whole, with all of that up in the air, Monica, what did you think of this episode?
I can't remember which character it was, but someone in this episode said, "Embrace the weird." And that is exactly it in this episode. It was a two-part finale, so like this is the second part, but like this one was weirder than the previous one. But it all came together at the end, so I felt better. I had closure for sure, for sure. Here it was just like there was just so many characters and so many ships and so many like people were changing. It was hard to keep up.
So much was happening. And it just seemed like it was too much for one episode. To me, it just seemed like it was just too much for one episode. But the Cerritos crew does what the Cerritos crew does. They find a way. In the words of Jurassic Park, life finds a way. And while the crew is retrofitting the ship, Captain Freeman is trying to parlay with the Klingons so to not let Maha and his brother go over. Somehow Maha's brother is hidden on the ship. And so now there's a whole nother thing of her having to find him because they receive a video stating that they have to hand over Maha and his brother to the Klingons, which was weird that it came from her husband. And even when I saw that it came from her husband, I was like, that's weird. That's super weird. But we find out later in the episode, it was a deep fake. It was all AI. Don't trust the videos, people. Don't even trust us. And then there's a lot of little stories. Normally you can follow an A line, a B line, a C line, and sometimes a D line. And then this one was just everything thrown together. We're more following the people than the storyline because they're all in one story. We see Rutherford is having his issues with the Cerritos, which then turns out to be an issue with his implant because he loves the Cerritos, he loves the ship, and we see that he is sort of fighting with a version of himself, which I will say in this season, I felt like we saw more of the merged version of him come out than just his happy-go-lucky self that we saw from episodes one, from seasons 1 and 2. And this episode, I thought we were really seeing his other self, his original self before he got the implant, come through a lot more. I thought that was going to be a callback to like him. It wasn't. He was just becoming himself. Like, he was just sort of becoming whole again and realizing he didn't need the computer. But that was I thought that was something that we were going to see. We see Ransom stand up for Beckett, the crew, but Beckett. He was protecting the crew, but he was protecting Beckett. And stopping a Klingon's fist from hitting her when Maha thinks that Beckett is the reason that his brother is missing, and he's protecting her. There's just a lot of emotional turmoil going on in the very beginning of this episode where I was just like, this is a little much for one episode. I just felt overwhelmed by the amount of things happening. And so before we get into like them coming together and saving the day, what did you think?
The opening, so speaking of the introduction to the episode, the opening scene, if you pause it at 2 minutes and 25 seconds, one of the characters changed into Laurel. And I saw it the second watch, and I was like, "Nuh-uh." And then I was like, I saw it in the opening scene. So I went back and I watched it again and I saw it, and then I paused it to type in the timeline. But I recognized that head. I could recognize that head from a mile away. Her head, and then the white coat that she wore. Oh, and the teeth. It was right there. That was Laurel. And Laurel is for a Star Trek Discovery for anyone who hasn't seen it. But her character was a great big roller coaster ride times three. So I was
Mhm.
surprised that there was that like deep dive into that episode right in the opening scene, and that piqued my interest there. But I'm sure there was lots of other scenes, maybe from Voyager, from Enterprise. Just crazy because I had not also seen a lot of Star Trek Discovery mentioned here. Oh, and then Sachs also mentioned Ash in one of his quick speeches. So that was just two Discovery plugs close to my heart. Yeah.
Um, so you mentioned the ships de-evolving, and so when they go into Schrodinger's cloud, we see that even though the Cerritos gave one ship the shield information, she did not share it with her other ships. So that's a bad leader on that front. Two, not Freeman, the Klingon leader, because she didn't share the shield upgrade with the rest of her crew. And so
Trelawney.
we see one of the Klingon ships sort of de-evolve into one of their old like boats. We also saw the Cerritos went through upgrades, a lot of upgrades, and we saw the Shaxs got very excited because they had some great weapon systems and the weapons were down. He never gets to use his weapons. I feel so bad for him. He just wants to eject the warp core. Let him eject the warp core once, twice. He did it once. Let's do it again. Um, and then we see at the very sort of like penultimate moment, the peak of everything going on is like the crew does, Cerritos does what Cerritos does best. They pull it together. And I have to say, did I scream when they took the shield back? I was very, very proud of them to see how they brought back the character from episode from like an earlier episode with the cubes and the spheres, Zeus's granddaughter coming back and standing on the ship, and you have that person from Delta ship holding her in while she, I just have to say it, she Kamehameha that girl. The way that she was standing and holding her hands to form that lightning bolt that she needed to throw at the Klingon ship to disrupt their electronics so they would disrupt their shields. That was for me, that was from Dragon Ball Z. That was a Kamehameha. I was geeked. Did I do that in my room a couple times? Did I do that little move? Like I had a lightning bolt thrown it at them? Yes, I did. um, but we get to see the crew using their different talents coming together. We saw that the Klingon ship was de-evolved. Like the ship wasn't touched, but the people on the ship were, and they all sort of de-evolved into lower beings of from the Klingon homeworld. And then we see what Cerritos also does. They saved the day. They put so much power into the fissure, they stabilized it, and it became this very pretty gate that was going to be open forever. That reminded me a lot of Deep Space Nine, at the way that they were on the edge of like another dimension, what they were on the edge of, and how they had like that star base there to protect and see what was coming in and out. And then we get to see, I'm honestly, this is where I cheered up. We got to see Starbase 80 because it was the least upgraded Starbase. It was moved there, which now is going to get recognition. It's going to get funding. It's going to get everything it needs. We get to see that Captain Freeman gets promoted and she is now in charge of Starbase 80. We see that her husband comes and lives with her. And at first I was like, wait, what's going on? Is she ever going, like, what is it about this world that makes couples live so far apart from each other and it's just okay? Because no. Because at first I would not have put it past them where her husband wasn't coming, but he did come. And they're living on Starbase 80 now, and we get to see them. And this time she's happy to go on Starbase 80. And the last time that she was on it, she was afraid of ending up there because her counterpart in another dimension ended up there. We get to see that Beckett handled her emotions rationally in public and irrationally in her room. I love that she's not having these tantrums in public. She is controlling herself. We saw that Rutherford took out his implant to save the day on the Cerritos ship, to make sure the power system could do whatever it needed to do. And now he's back to being full human, and now he's having emotions more, which I want to go on record as saying that Rutherford and Tindy still should be platonic friends. Please just let there be platonic friendships. That's all I'm asking for. And then we get the best, if not the funniest, warp sign off. Engage the core. Engage your core. Engage the core. What did you think of just everything? I know I just threw a lot at you, but what did you think about it?
Yeah, and I'm not gonna go in order, attempt to go in order because it's just there's so much there. So I might be hopping around here. But I noticed that there were similarities between Brad Boimler and Rutherford, because Brad ended up breaking his pad, the red pad from, I know we have like 3 Boimlers in this season, so it's a little confusing. But the Boimler with the beard that he was aspiring to be, basically. So his idol. He broke that pad because he did not want that to define him. And I also felt that same way with Rutherford. So his Oculus, he decided to move away from. So in both of those characters, I felt like their pad and their Oculus were like their binkies as kids, right? It was something that they were connected to and they felt the need to use. But then at a certain point, they grew up and realized they could make decisions, and went through some adulting and without them, and then be able to move on. And so it was cute how that those besties that are also roommates were able to grow together parallel, in this journey, but have separate adventures, right? They didn't grow apart. And so and it all came together in a wonderful story. Oh, and speaking of besties, we have Talin and Tendi. Like I kind of like that scene in which there was like these rainbows behind them, like they were like animated characters, like coming in to save the day and working as a team finally in this senior officer role, on the comms, and to help do whatever Momo Jobo they had to do.
When the ships were split into 2 types and then came back together, and it's like, oh, look at that science, love it. I remember when the season started and had this opening reel, and you got to see all the different stuff that the lower decks did, and it sort of closed with that. You saw Brad, you saw Beckett sort of no longer be lower deckers, and so can they still remain in the lower decks or call themselves lower deckers, as they are now provisional first officers for Ransom, who's now the captain of the Cerritos. We're seeing Tindy and Taylin be senior science officers. You're not really lower deckers anymore. Rutherford probably could be chief engineer if he just stopped turning down promotions and pips and stuff like that. So but one of the things I thought was very interesting is that we got to see a lot of people throughout that we saw throughout the series sort of come back in this episode. And one of the ones I loved the most was when they were in medical, and we see that kid who's been in medical the entire like 5 years, but there's like a rift that opens up, and then the guy who wanted to meditate. This is back in season 1, I believe. He wanted to meditate and like go to a higher plane, and then the ship was attacked. And Tindy, like before that, had like messed up his concentration. And at the end, when he sacrificed himself for her, he was able to like meditate and elevate out of his body to a whole nother level, where he became like lived on the astral plane. It's like he got dropped back into the Cerritos. And so like we see people from season 1 coming back. Also, when was Badgie back on the ship? Because I need him to go. Like, why was he back on the ship? I don't trust Badgie ever. I don't care if he's good G. I don't care which version of he is. No.
Right. At the end of that season, remember Rutherford said, "Oh, don't worry, I made another one." And so it was I was been waiting for actually for that other reinvented Badgie to appear. He was just lurking in the back in engineering of all places. So it was nice to see that montage at the end with many characters on the ship um, that participated in this big adventure, including those not on the bridge. So that was cool. I really liked seeing Mahal and his brother. I'm glad they brought back the lower deckers
Mhm.
from seasons ago forward, and then in the end he got promoted too, so now he's captain.
Yeah. So it's this ending was great, and for it to be the wrap up that it was for the series was amazing. I think that they did wrap up some storylines. There are still some that were like, okay, well, what's going on with that? I feel like there should have been more to X, Y, and Z. But for a lot of the major storylines for me, I do feel like they wrapped them up in the sense that we saw Brad have his like growth. And I remember mentioning it earlier in the series, in this season, that them I wanted Tindy and Rutherford and Brad to grow up, have their moments of like, stop reverting back to your old self. Like, do what Becca did, have your come to Jesus moment and move forward and like live in the life that you're in now. And with Brad breaking the pad, it was like he became himself. He's like, I'm going to stop going to this as my crutch. Like you said, he is like becoming himself. Like he still has his like, wait, you can't make us both professional first officers. That's not how it works. But like, he's not turning away his promotion. And he wasn't really overthinking it like he would have, like we've seen him do in the past. With Rutherford, we saw him fully integrate his past life and his like pre-explosion and post-explosion life. We saw them sort of truly become like he feels whole enough to go back to being full human. He's like not doing any upgrades. He wants to be exactly who he is. It was nice seeing their personal stories of like their like of them reaching the goals that were the point of the season, like get promoted, move up in Star Trek, in Starfleet. And so for this episode to sort of show they're all on their way to making their goals. Like they're not 100% there. Like they still have ways to go, but their personalities are where they need to be. And their work ethic is where it needs to be for them to move forward. And I am happy about that.
I did notice that they meaning the show writers ended with Brad and Mariner like disagreeing with the captain, and I was like, come on. Show your maturity now. You have your promotion. So I feel like it could be another roller coaster ride for their career next steps and their interpersonal dynamics
But it
as
will be a new ride. They won't be
right
making the
as
same
they try to
mistake.
compete because Ransom likes this competition thing.
Mhm.
And then Mariner was slouched in a chair with her hands crossed, like, oh my goodness.
But she's sitting in the chair.
Yes. But can you stay in the chair? But I think it's setting it up for maybe some offshoots, maybe some spinoff. Whether it's going to be like a 90-minute movie, because we know they can cover a lot of ground in a short period of time,
They
so it
can.
doesn't have to be like several seasons, but we could have movies here or there with new adventures, Starbase 80, with the new Next Generation, and the other adventures on the Cerritos.
I'm not ready for it to be over. But all good things must come to an end.
I really like the teamwork and how they were also able to integrate new characters in, like Talin.
Mhm.
And I like the fact that like many of the episode it ended with like a one-liner for her. There's many characters that I will miss, but she's a big whole void now in the Star Trek universe for me.
I'm really not ready for it to be over. I remember watching the first episode and immediately falling in love. These last 2 episodes were fun. I did watch them a couple of times just because I just wanted to keep enjoying the show, having the laughs. I'm also very proud of the characters, of where they've come. Because there are times where I go back and I do a rewatch, I'm just like, "Oh my gosh, get to where you are in season 5 already." And so I can definitely see there is change, there is growth, there is improvement. I love that Brad is keeping the beard, that he is growing up, that he is where he wanted to be. He's a professional first officer because he wants to be the first officer to then move on up to be captain one day. Beckett just wants to be in Starfleet. Like, she just wants to be in Starfleet. I know she doesn't really care if she's captain or not, but she just wants to be in Starfleet. Seeing them get their goals and this and the last couple of episodes, seeing the craziness that is the Cerritos, seeing Captain Freeman move on from this ship. And we've seen her move on in other seasons, not willingly. And this time she's excited for this new journey that she's going on. It was bittersweet. It was bittersweet. And this episode was fun, and I laughed, and I definitely cried. But I'm really sad to see it go, and I'm really mad. I don't want to finish talking because I don't want it to end. It was such a good show. Oh, I cannot wait. You guys have to come back and be with us as we do the season review, and then we're going to do a series review of just everything about Lower Decks. And as you can tell, we have a lot to discuss. But until then, as always, I'm Andrea.
And I'm Manika.
And live
Live
long and
long and
prosper.
prosper.